Vanessa came back home after her diagnosis, and everything changed. I had been living in the same house doing my thing, and then suddenly the rules got ridiculous. Mom was already on edge, like she was walking on glass around Vanessa. The moment she moved in, every little noise set her off. I dropped a fork in the kitchen, and she stared at me like I'd committed a crime. "Do you want to make her worse?" Mom snapped, the tone sharp. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that Vanessa's vibrations were apparently sensitive enough to feel me walking on the floor, or the fact that Mom fully believed it. "She can't hear you when you walk like that," Mom told me one night, looking at me like I was the one with the problem. "Put on slippers. It's the only way." I rolled my eyes, but it didn't matter. The next day she handed me a pair of fuzzy slippers, cheap beige things, and insisted I wear them around the house, like that was going to fix whatever was wrong with Vanessa. First it was annoying, but no big deal. I figured it'd blow over. But when I tried to meet my friends, I had to leave early so I could follow the slipper rule, walking on the carpet, moving with precision to avoid any sound that could trigger her. Vanessa was in the living room with her laptop, head buried in some weird, convoluted explanation of how vibrations were hurting her brain. "I can't take it," she said one night, her voice pitched high. "The vibrations. It's like an attack." Vibrations. I stared at her like she was insane. "Are you for real?" "I'm serious," she said with such a dramatic sigh. It could have been a scene from a bad soap opera. Mom nodded, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "She's not the one making things hard. You are." So now I was trapped in this stupid slipper-wearing routine. I couldn't go anywhere without hearing about the vibrations, and I couldn't even walk down the hallway without getting stared down like I was an intruder. But it got worse. Vanessa wasn't just sensitive to my walking anymore. One night, she claimed the vibrations from my breathing were affecting her. "I can't concentrate," she said, rubbing her temples. "The air moves when you breathe. It's too much." Mom was right there, nodding in agreement. "This isn't about you, sweetie. She's the one making it hard." So, of course, when I tried to stand up for myself, I was the villain. Things escalated fast. The next morning, I found myself sitting on the edge of the garage, my stuff packed up, with a vague explanation from Mom. "Your room's in the garage now," she said, looking anywhere but at me. "You're making her sick. You need space." I wanted to scream, but instead, I just stared at the garage door, numb. Vanessa's return had turned my life into a bizarre circus. Everyone sided with her. I didn't have a voice in my own house anymore. Every rule was about her, and I was just expected to obey, no questions asked. I spent 2 days in the garage just trying to make sense of everything. The smell of oil and old cardboard filled the air. I couldn't even leave to get food without Mom giving me a look like I was walking on glass. The rules had morphed into something more sinister, like I was the problem. Vanessa's breakdown had only added fuel to the fire. She was fragile now, apparently, and I was the one doing the damage. "I can't even focus with her here," Vanessa wailed to Mom one night, her voice high-pitched, almost frantic. "It's unbearable. Her presence. It makes my brain hurt." Mom nodded like it was gospel truth. "You need to take a break. We'll handle this." A few hours later, they called a family meeting. I walked into the living room, where they were all sitting, the atmosphere heavy and thick with tension. "Vanessa's condition is worsening," Dad said, like it was something I could have avoided. "We've been thinking. You need to leave for a while." "Leave?" I stared at him, then at Mom, who just nodded, looking like she couldn't decide whether to feel guilty or relieved. "Where am I supposed to go?" "We're sending you to your aunt's," Mom said. "You'll be better there. Get some space." I didn't argue. What was the point? Everything was twisted up by this point. Vanessa, Mom, Dad, they all believed I was the problem. When I arrived at Aunt Karen's place, I knew it wouldn't be easy. She wasn't exactly warm, and I barely knew her outside of holiday visits. She didn't know me the way my parents did. "Here," Aunt Karen said, handing me a pair of slippers, fuzzy and worn just like the ones Mom had given me. "It's a rule in this house. Wear them, keep things calm." I stared at the slippers for a moment, then just put them on because what else was there to do? This wasn't even about me anymore. That night I tried to talk to her, hoping for something, but she just stared at me over her glass of wine like I was the one who needed fixing. "I'm sure your Mom and Dad are just doing their best," Aunt Karen said, her voice flat. "This can't be easy for anyone." "Easy?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. "This is insane. They're treating me like a villain for existing." "Well, you've been through a lot," she said, cutting me off. "You're not exactly handling things well either." I didn't have the energy to argue. It didn't matter. Everyone was on Vanessa's side. I didn't even exist in my own family anymore. But a few days later, as I was going through some of Aunt Karen's old emails, looking for anything to keep my mind from spiraling, I found something strange. It was an email from Vanessa. The subject line read, college enrollment status. I clicked on it. In it, Vanessa had forwarded a message from the college, asking her to provide proof of enrollment. I didn't think much of it at first, but the next email I opened sent a chill down my spine. It was a letter from the college admissions office, stating that Vanessa hadn't been enrolled for over a year. I sat back rereading the message. What the hell? She'd been gone from school? She had lied about everything. I didn't know why, but I started digging. I called the college, trying to keep my voice steady. After some back and forth, they confirmed it. Vanessa had been expelled months ago for cheating. They didn't give me many details, but it didn't matter. It all made sense now. Vanessa had needed me gone. She'd needed everyone to believe her version of events, the one where she was the victim. She was hiding something huge, something no one could know about, and I had to be out of the picture for it to work. I let that sink in for a while. Vanessa wasn't just pretending to be sick or fragile. She was a fraud. All of it was a cover-up. I wasn't the one who was making her life unbearable. She'd been lying from the start, and I was about to expose it. But for now, I just had to keep quiet. I couldn't tip anyone off. Not yet. I couldn't stop thinking about the emails. Vanessa's lies were bigger than I had imagined. She wasn't just skipping out on school. She was actively covering it up, manipulating everyone around her. My hands shook as I pulled up her school email on my phone. I scrolled through the messages, forwarded letters from the admissions office, requests for information that never got answered. Everything had been redirected to her personal inbox, nothing going directly to the college. I wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, I called the college pretending to be Vanessa. I wasn't sure what I expected, but when the receptionist confirmed that she had been expelled months ago, it felt like a punch to the gut. There were no second chances, no appeals. She was done, expelled for cheating, and she'd kept up the act, pretending to be enrolled all this time. I tried to stay calm. Is there any way she can get back in? I asked, making my voice sound uncertain, like I was the one who'd been left in the dark. Unfortunately, once a student is dismissed for academic dishonesty, that's final, the woman said, her voice warm but firm. I thanked her and hung up. That was it. It was all falling into place. I started going through more of Vanessa's old emails, finding more red flags. Scholarships she'd turned down, a letter from a professor offering support that was never replied to, her withdrawal from all her courses. It wasn't a decision she'd made on her own. Someone had been handling her affairs for her, someone who could control her image and her academic record. I felt a cold, familiar rage building up in me. There were other things too, things that didn't make sense. As I dug deeper, I found her school account had been accessed from the family's Wi-Fi. The IP address matched with the one we used at home. It was her using our house to cover her tracks. I couldn't let this slip through the cracks. I had the evidence. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating mom and dad. She had stolen from me my future and everything I had worked for. I spent the next few days putting everything together. The emails, the IP data, the timeline of when she'd been expelled, and when she'd been pretending to be enrolled. I called Aunt Karen trying to explain how serious this was. At first, she didn't get it, but once I laid everything out, she started helping me gather even more. Texts, old documents, anything that would show Vanessa had been running a con from day one. I had everything ready. The case was clear. But when I tried to talk to the police, they barely took me seriously. I remember standing in that sterile, uncomfortable room with the officer, holding out the files. "Ma'am, this sounds like a family issue," he said, rubbing his temples like he'd already decided it wasn't worth his time. "I'm sorry, but we can't get involved in personal disputes." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped, my voice rising before I could stop it. "This isn't just a family issue. This is fraud. Identity theft. She's been pretending to be me, she's been lying, and now she's stealing everything I had." The officer just shook his head. "I understand you're upset, but unless she's physically hurt you or stolen something tangible, there's not much we can do." I felt my blood boil, but there was no point in arguing. They weren't going to help me. So I took matters into my own hands. I had everything, the proof, the motive, now I just had to act. I started reaching out to the college again, trying to find anyone who would take me seriously. I emailed the registrar's office, trying to get them to reopen Vanessa's case, to reinstate me where she'd taken everything from me. At the same time, I kept digging into Vanessa's life, pulling every thread I could find. And then I found it, something I didn't expect. Vanessa's personal accounts, the ones she used to impersonate me, had been set up in my name. She'd been using my identity, signing me up for things I didn't remember, getting benefits and services under my name. It made my stomach churn. She hadn't just stolen my future. She'd stolen my identity. I showed up at the registrar's office the next morning with everything in hand. The emails, the IP logs, the letters from Vanessa's professors, all of it. I spread it out across the desk, feeling like I was about to tear open a dam and drown in the truth. The woman behind the desk barely glanced at it before she said, "This is a lot of information. It'll take some time to process." "You don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This isn't just a clerical error. My sister has been impersonating me, stealing my identity, making my life hell. I was expelled because of her. She hasn't been enrolled in over a year, and you've been sending everything to the wrong person." She picked up a paper, glanced at it, and then at me, a bored expression forming. "I understand your frustration, but this is a complex situation. We'll need at least 72 hours to get back to you." 72 hours? My voice cracked. "I've been fighting for months, and you think I have 72 hours to fix this? I need to get back in now." Her face hardened. "I'm sorry. That's the procedure. I suggest you give it some time." I didn't argue. There was no point, but the word she used stuck with me: procedure, time, delay. I couldn't wait. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I left the office feeling like I'd hit a wall. It wasn't enough. The school was going to stall, and I couldn't let them. I needed something more concrete, something that would force their hand. "Let's go to the police," Aunt Karen said when I got back to her house. Her voice was steady, calm. "If they won't help you, we'll force them to." We drove to the precinct, and as I told my story again, I could feel my patience wearing thin. The officer on duty didn't even look at the documents, just sighed and gave me that same dismissive tone I'd gotten before. "This is a family issue," he said again. "There's nothing we can do unless there's actual theft, and even then." "No." I cut him off, slamming the papers onto the counter. "This is fraud. I'm being stolen from, and you're just going to let it slide? She's using my name, my identity, and you won't even open an investigation?" He glanced at the papers, then back at me before shaking his head. "We don't investigate family disputes unless there's a crime. This is just a mess. You need to handle it with a lawyer." I bit down on my tongue so hard I thought it might bleed. I didn't have time for this, but there was nothing I could do. The police weren't going to help. Back at Aunt Karen's house, I felt completely stuck, but she wasn't. By the time I had gotten back, she'd already contacted a lawyer she knew through a friend. "We'll get this moving legally," she said, as calm as ever. That night, Aunt Karen helped me build a solid case. She contacted an expert, someone who knew the ins and outs of identity theft and academic fraud. They were willing to help, but they needed proof. They needed witnesses. They needed something Vanessa couldn't deny. I knew where to start. I began reaching out to people who had witnessed Vanessa's sensory episodes firsthand. I gathered texts, photos, anything that could show her fabricating illness to cover her tracks. Then I dug through social media, Instagram, Facebook, wherever I could find her. I knew the truth was out there, buried beneath the lies she told, and I found it. Instagram posts of Vanessa at concerts, posted just days before her sensory overloads. There she was, smiling, dancing, completely fine. No vibrations in the air. I muttered to myself as I scrolled. Nothing wrong at all. I forwarded everything to Aunt Karen's lawyer, who made a quick call to the department head at my college. "You've got 2 weeks to fix this," the department head said after receiving the evidence, her voice tight but conceding. "We'll reinstate her if she gets the work done, but she needs to show up and prove she's been wronged. No more excuses." I barely heard the rest of the conversation. 2 weeks. I could do that, but I was running out of time. Every minute that ticked by felt like another piece of my life being stolen from me. The fight wasn't over yet, but now at least I had a shot at winning. I didn't expect it to hit like this. I thought I had all the angles covered. Vanessa's lies, the school, the police doing nothing. But I wasn't prepared for the financial bombshell. I pulled my credit report out of curiosity, expecting to see some minor discrepancies from Vanessa's impersonations. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 credit cards had been opened under my name. I stared at the screen, feeling a sickening jolt. They weren't just small purchases either. Hundreds, even thousands of dollars were charged to these accounts. It wasn't just academic fraud. It was full-blown identity theft. I'd known something wasn't right, but this was next level. I immediately filed a fraud report, and once I did, I contacted the police. They had no choice but to take it seriously now. Or so I thought. Within days, a detective called. He was assigned to my case. "I see the charges," he said over the phone. his voice professional but flat. "This is felony-level identity theft. We'll start an investigation, but you need to be prepared for a long process." I couldn't believe it. Long process? I was already living through a nightmare. But as the detective kept talking, I realized he wasn't completely dismissing me. He was acknowledging the severity of what Vanessa had done. That small piece of validation gave me some kind of hope. That same night, as I sat at Aunt Karen's house, scrolling through the mounting evidence on my phone, the doorbell rang. I froze. When I opened it, there they were, my parents. "Why haven't you just let this go?" Mom asked, her voice strained. Dad was standing behind her, arms crossed, his face hard. "Let it go," I repeated. I couldn't believe they were here, still backing Vanessa. "You're both part of this. She's been using my identity to open credit cards in my name. You don't get to ask me to drop it." Dad stepped forward. "This has gone too far, okay? You're ruining the family. This is your fault, not Vanessa's." "You really think I'm the one to blame?" I asked, a laugh escaping that sounded way too hollow. "She's the one who's been pretending to be me. She made me a villain in all of this." Mom tried to grab my arm, pleading, "Look, we've spoken to Vanessa and..." Before she could finish, Dad spoke again, his voice low but sharp. "We'll give you money, whatever you need to fix this. Just drop the charges. This will tear the family apart." I was so angry I couldn't even respond at first. Money? They were bribing me, trying to bury the truth just to keep everything quiet. But I knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't want Vanessa to go down for what she'd done. They just wanted me to disappear. "I'm not taking your money," I said, my voice thick with disgust. "And I'm not dropping the charges." That was when Dad lost it. "You're making a huge mistake. You're destroying everything we've built." I'd had enough. "This is on Vanessa, not me. If you want to keep ignoring the truth, that's your choice. But don't come to me with this crap again." I didn't want to hear another word. I slammed the door in their faces and immediately called the detective. I told him what had just happened and he was quick to take action. Recording, he told me it was all I needed. So I'd done exactly that, secretly recording every word. The next day, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was the registrar from my school. "After reviewing the police report and your evidence, we've decided to reinstate you," she said. "But we need you to complete the coursework. 2 weeks. That's your deadline." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I finally had the chance to fix things. But I knew Vanessa wasn't going to just sit back and let me take this back. Then a bombshell. Daniel, Vanessa's ex, called me. "I've been talking to her, and I want you to know you're not alone," he said, his voice low but sure. "I've got the proof. She's been lying to everyone." He sent me texts, photos of her messages with him, where she bragged about how she had manipulated everyone. It was a gold mine. There she was talking about how easy it was to get everyone to believe her, how she used her episodes to manipulate Mom and Dad, how she'd used my absence to cover up everything, to erase her mistakes. Daniel didn't want to get involved any more than necessary, but his support meant everything. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Vanessa had been running a con, playing everyone against each other to hide the truth. And now it was time for her to face the consequences. I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. The detective was already making progress, and with Daniel's evidence, I was ready to tear down the last of her lies. The battle wasn't over, but I could see the end in sight. The clock was ticking. I had 2 weeks to make up months of work, 2 weeks to prove that I wasn't the screw-up everyone had painted me to be. The pressure was unreal, but I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to stay in school, I had to pull this off. Ashley was my lifeline. She set up a schedule, got everyone in our study group to pitch in, and we started this insane marathon of late nights and endless caffeine. My classmates, those who weren't entirely wrapped up in their own drama, dropped everything to help me. We were drowning in papers, assignments, projects. I had to learn how to write 20-page reports on topics I hadn't even looked at in months. It felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it all, but there was no time for breakdowns. I had deadlines to meet, and if I didn't make it, I'd be out of school. And if I was out of school, there was nothing left for me. Meanwhile, Vanessa was back on her social media grind, posting nonstop about her struggles. She had it all: blurry selfies, overly dramatic captions about how hard it was to deal with ableism in the world, how she was misunderstood, how people just didn't get her sensory overloads. I wanted to scream when I saw the posts. She wasn't just lying about me anymore. She was turning herself into some kind of martyr, like the world owed her something for her condition. But the worst part, people were buying it. I saw comments from old friends, family members, even some of my professors, offering sympathy, encouragement, and prayers. They had no idea that she had been faking it all along. Then a real expert reached out to me, Dr. Jameson, an ADHD specialist who had reviewed Vanessa's case for the police. He offered to testify in court, stating that Vanessa's claims about sensory overload and her supposed condition were entirely fabricated. It's an obvious case of malingering, he said. After reviewing her social media and medical history, she's been manipulating people for a long time. That was huge. A professional calling her out in front of the court would be a game changer. But even with all of this mounting evidence, I couldn't take my foot off the gas. The work wasn't done. I needed to keep moving, keep fighting. I had no other choice. But then everything blew up again. Vanessa posted a video on Instagram, ranting about how dangerous it was for people to spread lies about her. She said I was threatening her and ruining her life. Then she tagged me in the video, calling me an abuser, claiming I was trying to destroy her with lies and gaslighting her into thinking she was crazy. She was playing the victim hard, and this time she crossed a line. I hadn't even finished watching the video when my phone buzzed with a message from the detective. Vanessa violated her bail conditions. She's been online threatening you. We've got enough now. We're arresting her again. No bail this time. I could barely breathe as I read the message. Vanessa had violated her bail? That meant she was going down. And this time there was no way out for her. I felt a mix of relief and fury. It should have been enough to feel like I won, but it didn't, because there was still so much to do. Vanessa wasn't going to stop until she got exactly what she wanted. She wasn't going to admit that she was a liar, no matter how much evidence I had. I pushed the feeling aside and buried myself in my work again. I couldn't afford to stop, not even for a minute. With the group's help, I powered through the assignments, finishing just in time. It wasn't pretty, and I barely remembered what I had written, but it was done. All of it. I submitted everything the night before the deadline, collapsing onto the couch with a sense of disbelief. But even as I finished my last assignment, I knew the battle wasn't over. It wasn't just about school anymore. It wasn't even just about Vanessa's arrest. It was about reclaiming my life from the lies she'd built around me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I had a real shot at winning. The fallout hit hard, and it wasn't just from Vanessa anymore. My parents had been circling me like sharks, trying to fix the mess they helped create. A week after Vanessa's second arrest, they showed up at Aunt Karen's, practically begging me to take a deal they had cooked up. "We're offering you money to make this go away," Mom said, her voice tight, almost pleading. "If you sign an NDA, we'll take care of everything. All of it. You don't have to deal with this anymore." My stomach churned. "What are you talking about? You want me to cover it all up again? Let Vanessa walk free because you're too afraid to admit what she did?" Dad's face was stone, but his eyes were desperate. "It's not that simple. We can't afford any more public fallout. You need to think about the family, about your future." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "My future? You want me to bury the truth just so you can all pretend this never happened? No thanks." They stood there for a few seconds, and I could see them calculating whether to push further. But they didn't. They left, defeated, but I knew this wasn't the end. The next few days dragged on. I spent hours on the phone with credit card companies, trying to clear up the mess Vanessa had made of my finances. Every conversation left me more exhausted than the last. But at least, after a few weeks of back and forth, the credit card companies cleared the debt. My credit score, though, it was wrecked. It wasn't just the financial hit, it was the fact that I'd been treated like a criminal in my own life. Ashley was the only person who kept me grounded through it all. When I was drowning in paperwork and calls, she showed up with food, caffeine, and a fresh perspective. She even helped me draft emails for the college to ensure they understood the full extent of what I had been through. One afternoon, after hours of study sessions, she turned to me. "You know, when all this is done, you don't have to stay here. After graduation, I can help. You can move in with me." Her offer hit me harder than I expected. "You don't have to do that," I said, my voice thick. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," she said firmly. "You've been through hell, and you need a place that's yours. No one's going to control you anymore. I want to help you start over." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say no, that I could handle things on my own, but deep down I knew I couldn't. I wasn't going to rebuild my life by myself. The emotional toll didn't stop there. Dr. Jameson, the ADHD expert who had helped me before, was asked to testify for Vanessa. When he reviewed her full history, he made another shocking diagnosis. Vanessa didn't just fake symptoms. He formally diagnosed her with antisocial traits. He said it was clear that she had been manipulating everyone for years, using charm, deceit, and false narratives to get what she wanted. I wasn't surprised. It was the final piece of the puzzle, but hearing it out loud from someone in a position of authority made it even more real. Vanessa's whole life had been a lie. The final blow came in the form of an unexpected email from the department head at school. "We have a position opening in the research department, and after reviewing your recent work and the circumstances surrounding your case, we'd like to offer you the role. It would include a full stipend and access to resources for your continued academic development." I stared at the screen, numb for a moment. It was the validation I needed, but it felt like a hollow victory. Everything I had done to survive this nightmare, every tear, every sleepless night, had led to this moment, but the weight of it still sat heavily on my chest. I'd been handed a lifeline, but I wasn't sure yet if I was ready to reach for it. Vanessa refused the plea deal. When I heard it, I felt a wave of disbelief. She could have taken the easy way out, but no, she wanted a trial where she could spin her web of lies one last time. My stomach churned. I had hoped she'd take the deal, but now the whole thing was going to drag on, and I knew the worst was yet to come. Ashley and I spent the next few weeks preparing. I dove back into the case, rereading the files, pulling together everything I had, texts, photos, all the evidence that Vanessa had stolen from me. Ashley stayed by my side, helping me work through the details. I was surviving on coffee and determination, but it was hard. I couldn't shake the thought that I was walking into a battlefield where I'd already been the victim for too long. But this time I wasn't going to let her win. I also started seeing a therapist, someone who could help me process everything Vanessa had done. It wasn't just the stolen identity, the fraud, or the emotional manipulation. It was the years of gaslighting, the way Vanessa had turned the whole family against me. She'd always been so good at twisting the truth, making me feel like I was the crazy one, the problem. The therapist helped me understand that I wasn't imagining it. Vanessa had been playing a dangerous game. The night before the trial, I sat with Ashley, my mind a million miles away. "What if I can't do this?" I whispered, my voice raw. "What if I freeze on the stand?" Ashley squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think. You've already been through the worst of it. Now it's time to speak the truth." I nodded, not fully believing her but knowing it was what I had to do. The next morning we filed into the courtroom. The air felt thick with tension, and I could barely focus on the process. The seats filled up quickly. Friends of the family, people Vanessa had manipulated for years, all there to watch the spectacle. The moment Vanessa walked in, everything about the room shifted. She looked calm, collected, like she was still the victim. The same Vanessa, the same manipulator, but it wasn't working anymore. When her lawyer tried to make a statement, Vanessa interrupted. "I don't need him," she declared, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I'll represent myself." Everyone was shocked. Her lawyer looked like he was about to faint, but he quickly backed off, stepping aside as Vanessa took control. I couldn't believe it. She was trying to control the narrative again, trying to make herself the center of attention. I could feel her eyes on me, full of hatred, and I knew this was going to get ugly. When it was my turn to testify, I felt every eye on me. I stood and made my way to the witness stand, my palms sweaty, my heart pounding. But when I opened my mouth, the words came out steady. It wasn't about proving she was a liar anymore. It was about telling my story, about everything she had taken from me. Vanessa's lawyer was gone, but she wasn't silent. She ranted, trying to make me look unstable, to spin everything I said into a wild accusation. "You're lying," she yelled at me from her seat, her voice rising. "None of this is true. You're just angry, crazy." But I didn't react. I couldn't. I had to stay calm, even when she tried to bait me. I knew what she was doing. Ashley was the next one to take the stand. Her testimony was a punch to the gut for Vanessa. She laid out everything. How she had seen the manipulation up close, how Vanessa had slowly pulled the strings, how she had seen the abusive texts, the false claims, everything. Then came Daniel. His voice cracked as he spoke about how Vanessa had lied to him, how she'd used him, how she'd twisted the truth. "I thought I was helping her," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "but I was just part of the game." The final blow came from Dr. Jameson. His words were the sharpest of all. He confirmed Vanessa's pattern of manipulative behavior, diagnosing her with antisocial traits. He explained how she had expertly manipulated everyone around her, how she had convinced us all that she was the victim when in fact she had been the abuser all along. Vanessa sat there, her face twisted in rage, her eyes darting between the witnesses, trying to hold it together. But she couldn't. By the time the jury went to deliberation, it was clear who had won. Vanessa had been found guilty on all counts. As the jury filed back into the room, I held my breath, bracing for the verdict. The judge called it guilty on all charges. I felt a cold rush of relief wash over me. It wasn't over yet, but it was a victory. A small one, but a victory nonetheless. Vanessa had finally been exposed. She was going down. And for the first time in a long time I could finally breathe. The sentencing came a week after the trial. I sat in the courtroom, the weight of the past year pressing down on me as the judge read the verdict. Vanessa's expression was cold, almost smug, but I could see the cracks starting to show. She was finally getting what she deserved. 3 years in prison, the judge said, his voice steady, and restitution in the amount of $100,000 to the victim. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I didn't feel any joy. There was a sense of finality, but the damage had already been done. 3 years in prison didn't undo the years of my life she had stolen, the financial destruction, the emotional toll. Still, it was something. It was justice, or as close as I'd get. But even as the judge pronounced the sentence, my phone buzzed with a text. I didn't need to look. I knew exactly who it was. My parents. "We tried to help you, but you've ruined this family," Mom's message read. "You've torn everything apart. We'll never forgive you for this." I didn't even bother reading the rest. There was always something in their words, always some part of me they couldn't accept, some piece of the blame they had to throw onto me, even after everything had come to light. I deleted the message, then blocked their number. It wasn't easy. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out, to explain, to beg for their understanding. But it was clear they would never understand. They would never accept the truth. The guilt they tried to force on me, no, I wasn't carrying that anymore. The next day I changed my number. I blocked every one of them. Mom, Dad, and Vanessa's extended family. The cycle of manipulation, the lies, it ended with me. That evening I received an email that stopped me in my tracks. It was from a school across the country. I'd applied to grad school months ago, thinking there was no way they'd accept me after everything. But there it was, a letter of acceptance. The school had reviewed my application, my work, and even the circumstances surrounding my case, and they wanted me to start in the fall. I stared at the screen for a while, letting the reality sink in. This was it, a chance to move forward, to leave everything behind, to reclaim the life Vanessa had almost taken from me. I accepted. The next few months were a blur of preparation, packing, paperwork, and goodbyes that I never thought I'd get to make. But as graduation came and went, I felt lighter. I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something better. At my new school, I found a small group of people who got it. One of them, a student I tutored, came to me after a session one day. Her voice was shaky as she spoke. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," she said. "Everyone says I'm crazy, that I'm making things up. My family, they don't understand what I've been through." I knew exactly what she meant. I'd lived through that same isolation, that same feeling of being gaslit and torn apart by the people who should have had my back. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before I responded. "You're not crazy," I said, my voice steady. "You're not alone, and you don't have to keep suffering in silence. You can find your voice, and you can take back the space you've been denied." Her eyes widened, like she hadn't even realized she'd been holding her breath. You really think so?" I smiled. "I know so." I left that conversation feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and I was helping others do the same. I walked louder now on campus, through the hallways, everywhere I went. The kind of walk that wasn't careful, wasn't timid, wasn't afraid of making noise. I was taking up the space I deserved, and it felt good. Vanessa might have tried to take everything from me, but in the end she couldn't. I was still here, and for the first time I was finally free. It took time to settle into my new routine. At first, the days felt long, as if I were floating through them untethered. But with each passing week, the weight that had once settled on my chest lightened. I threw myself into my studies, buried myself in the quiet of my new life. I didn't need anything loud, anything dramatic. I just needed space to breathe, to heal in small increments. I had my own apartment now, tucked away on the edge of campus. It was a small place, barely enough for the essentials, but it was mine. There was peace in the silence. I could wake up, drink my coffee, study, eat when I wanted, sleep when I wanted. No one telling me how to exist. No one dictating the rules of my life. One afternoon a letter arrived. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Vanessa. I almost didn't open it. Part of me wanted to burn it, toss it aside and forget she ever existed. But I read it anyway. The words inside were the same as always: manipulative, guilt-laden. She claimed she was sorry for everything, that she never meant for it to go this far, and that she was suffering in prison. She wanted me to forgive her, to pretend everything was fine. But I knew better. It was all a ploy, another attempt to make me the villain, to make me feel like I owed her something. I didn't hesitate. I tore the letter up and burned the pieces. It felt cathartic, like another small victory. As if that wasn't enough, a check came a few weeks later. It was from my parents, a peace offering, they claimed, $1,000, with a note that said they hoped it would help me move on and make things right. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want their money. I didn't want any part of their attempts to buy my silence or affection. I took the check to a local shelter and donated it. Someone else could use it more than I ever would. Over time, I started teaching undergrad classes. It wasn't much at first, just a small seminar, but it was a step forward. The students were eager, asking questions, engaging with the material. Slowly, I found my voice again. Teaching was a way for me to connect, to share what I knew, to give others the guidance I never had when I needed it most. And as I stood in front of those students, explaining concepts and sharing stories, I began to rebuild my confidence. It was still fragile, but it was mine. I could feel it growing like a seed taking root in the soil. One afternoon after class, a student approached me. She seemed hesitant, unsure, but she finally spoke up. I don't know how to explain this, but I feel like you get it. Like you understand what it's like to have your reality twisted by people you trust. My family, they make me feel crazy sometimes, and I don't know how to make it stop. I could feel my heart tighten, but I smiled. You're not crazy, I said, my voice calm but firm. What you're going through is real, and you deserve to have your truth heard. You don't need anyone's permission to exist or to speak your truth, and you don't need to take responsibility for their actions. You've got to reclaim your space. She nodded, her eyes wide with relief. I knew I was helping, and that made everything worth it. I'd been where she was, unsure, scared, drowning in someone else's narrative, but now I was helping her rewrite hers. I walked home that night, my steps sure, my head held high. I wasn't running from anything anymore. Vanessa's lies, my parents' guilt, it didn't have control over me. I had reclaimed my space, and I wasn't going to shrink anymore. I walked louder now, unafraid of the sound my footsteps made. I was finally living life on my terms, and nothing could take that away from me.